I want to add to what has been said here in the last few minutes. We are at a very critical juncture during this Congress and indeed in our country. What I want to talk about today is the nonsense that's going on right now about funding our military. These are men and women around the world in uniform whose mission it is to protect our freedom. Let me remind everybody that there are only 6 reasons why 13 colonies got together in the first place to create this union. One of those was to provide for the national defense. And yet here we are basically trying to do what the president has asked and fund the military, and we're being obstructed by the people across the aisle. I just don't understand that, Mr. President. We have people right now who are in danger of not being able to fulfill their missions around the world. As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, I've traveled extensively over the last year and a half. I've seen around the world where dedicated men and women don't have the resources to fulfill their missions, and it endangers the very freedom that we have here at home. I believe that this is a critical point in this Congress to tell the American people we're either going to break through this gridlock and move to do what's right, or we're going to sit here on our hands and argue the political side of this while our men and women are endangered. Some of the hardest things to understand right now, Mr. President, is the fact that in the last 30 years, we've continued literally to disinvest in our military. This chart shows, under the last 3 Democratic presidents, how we've disinvested in the military. This green line is a chart of the percentage of GDP that we spent on our military. And so it's gotten down all the way to today, we're spending 3% of our GDP. It's the lowest point in the last 30 years, Mr. President. And I will say this, the 30-year average here is about 4.2%. Now that differential is 100 basis points. And what that means is about, in today's size of economy, is about $200 billion. Now to put that in perspective, we're spending about $600 billion on our military today. Can you imagine what difference that would make? The last time a Secretary of Defense put a budget up based on a bottom-up estimate of need based on the missions around the world was Secretary Gates in 2011. In 2011, he estimated that for 2016 and 17, what we're talking about here in this budget, his estimate was some tens of billions of dollars more than what we're doing now. And his estimate was prior to ISIS, prior to Russia's activity in Crimea, Ukraine, and Georgia. And what happens now, Mr. President, is that in the next 10 years, unless something is done under the current presidential plan of spending for the next 10 years, not only are we going to add $9.5 trillion to our debt, but we're going to reduce military spending to 2.6% of GDP. Now, that's another roughly $100 billion of cuts if the economy were to stay the same. Mr. President, I just don't understand this brinksmanship that we see. This is not the first time. I think this is the 5th time we're going to have voted on funding our military. The reaction of the other side befuddles me from the standpoint that they tell us they want to support our men and women. They give us these heart-wrenching stories, and yet then they won't stand up and let us even get the bill on the floor. Mr. President, to be brief, it's time for the Democrats to stop the obstructionism and the political showmanship. This is about the security of our country, about the lives of our men and women abroad. They deserve better than this. We can do better than this. The world is more dangerous than in any time in my lifetime. It's time, Mr. President, that we stand up and tell the world what we're committed to, and that is to provide for our own national defense. That means funding this defense appropriations bill.